Sometimes a question resonates far more deeply than we ever anticipate. Dot, there are moments in life that make us question everything we believe. A loss, a turning point, or an unexpected question. Dot. Has there ever been a moment like that for you? When did you ask the biggest question of your life? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. That night, Sandra Bullock had such a moment. The room was small, but packed. Most people expected her to simply give a speech, talk about her career, share life lessons. But tonight was different. As Sandra stepped up to the podium, the room fell silent. Everyone was ready to listen. But the one who stood out the most was 8-year-old Lily. Dressed in a simple white dress, she sat quietly, clutching an old Bible, a cherished gift from her grandmother. Before her mother brought her there, she had whispered, "You can ask your question, Lily, but only if you truly believe." Lily nodded, but her heart was racing. Amid the hum of conversation, she waited for the right moment. And when it came, her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Sandra Bullock, what does God mean to you?" The room froze. People turned to look at her. But more than anything, something stirred deep inside Sandra. Just a few words. But sometimes a few words can change a life. Sandra's hand rested lightly on the podium. Millions knew her, but in this moment, all eyes were on Lily. The little girl's question hung in the air, and the silence in the room deepened. It was an unexpected question. The cameras, the microphones, the audience. For a brief moment, they all seemed to fade away. All that remained were Lily's unwavering eyes, small yet profound. Sandra hesitated for a moment. There was so much to say, but she didn't know where to begin. She was used to speaking in front of millions, moving people with her words. But this time, it was different. Years ago, she might have brushed off a question like this with a quick, polished response. But now she knew some questions couldn't be answered so easily. Her eyes drifted to the old Bible Lily clutched against her chest. The pages were worn, the gold lettering on the cover nearly faded. This wasn't just a book. It was a memory. Sandra took a deep breath. "That's a big question, Lily," she said softly. Her voice echoed through the quiet room. But before saying anything more, she paused. Because some words don't just come from the lips. Some words are the expression of something that has been growing inside us for years. And now she needed to find them. The entire room held its breath. Everyone was waiting. But for the first time, Sandra felt truly exposed. Because this wasn't just a question Lily needed an answer to. It was a question Sandra had been asking herself. Sandra leaned slightly against the podium, never breaking eye contact with Lily. Everyone in the room was waiting for her answer. But for Sandra, this was more than just answering a question. This was a moment of reckoning. "You know, Lily," she began, her voice softer than usual, "I've thought about what God means to me many times over the years." Someone in the audience leaned forward. A few people lowered their gaze. The silence carried the weight of everything left unsaid. "I've always been someone who tries to control everything," Sandra admitted. "I plan, I work, I push forward. But life has a way of teaching you that no matter how strong you think you are, control is never truly yours." Lily's fingers tightened around the edges of her worn Bible. She didn't speak, but her eyes absorbed every word. Sandra thought about that moment. The time when she had no control. The moment everything in her life changed. Was she ready to share it? Her eyes met Lily's again. The little girl's face was patient, yet filled with curiosity. She was waiting. They were all waiting. Sandra smiled gently, but something deep inside her stirred. "Let me tell you a story, Lily," she said. The air in the room shifted. People leaned in. Because this wasn't going to be an ordinary answer. This was a moment of transformation. Sandra took a deep breath. "Let me tell you a story, Lily." The entire room was now completely focused on her. "When I was young, I thought I had all the answers. I believed that if I worked hard enough, I could accomplish anything. But life has a way of teaching you that it's not that simple." For a moment, Sandra's gaze drifted into the distance. "Losing someone makes believing the hardest thing in the world." Lily's expression grew serious. Her small fingers tightened around the edges of her Bible. In that moment, Sandra knew. Lily understood this feeling. "I lost someone very close to me," Sandra admitted. "And at that moment I blamed God. I kept asking myself, if God is real, why would he let this happen?" Sandra turned her eyes to Lily. "Have you ever felt that way, Lily?" The little girl gave the slightest nod. Maybe no one else in the room noticed. But Sandra did. Because this wasn't just a question. It was a wound she had carried for a long time. "It takes courage to ask that question," Sandra said gently. "But sometimes the most important answers are hidden inside the hardest questions." The room held its breath. Now, everyone was waiting. They only wanted one thing. The answer. Sandra paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "You know, Lily," she finally said, her voice deep yet calm, "after that loss, I stopped believing in God for a long time. Because if he was really there, why would he allow something like that?" Not a single person in the room moved. Everyone was waiting for her answer. But Sandra knew the answer hadn't come right away. "The hardest part," she continued, "was that no one could give me a real explanation. So I had to find my own." Lily's eyes widened slightly. She, too, was searching for an answer. Sandra smiled softly. "For years, I tried to control everything. I thought if I was strong enough, I could handle anything. But sometimes life shakes you, doesn't it?" Lily gave a small nod. Sandra quote. Eyes drifted for a moment. "The day I lost them," she whispered. "I sat in my room for hours. The phone didn't ring. No one knocked on the door. The silence was suffocating. It felt like the world didn't hear my pain." She looked back at the crowd. Maybe all of us at some point have asked this question. We all try to hold on to something, but sometimes it slips right through our fingers. Then she turned back to Lily. "And that," she said softly, "is exactly why I began to understand what God meant to me." The entire room was hanging onto her words. Something was changing. And Sandra was about to get to the most important part. She glanced around the room briefly. "When I lost them, I felt an emptiness inside me," she said. "I blamed God. I blamed myself. I searched for answers, but nothing changed." Lily listened intently. Maybe she didn't have the answer yet either. But she understood. "And then," Sandra continued, "something strange happened. Just when I was ready to give up, I had a dream. The person I missed the most was there, smiling at me, just the way they always had. And they only said one thing. 'Don't leave me here.'" A few people in the audience nodded. The atmosphere in the room had shifted. Everyone had found a piece of themselves in that one sentence. "That's when I realized something," Sandra said, her voice growing stronger. "God is always with us. But sometimes we don't hear him because we don't want to." Lily's Bible crinkled slightly in her hands. Sandra noticed the change in her face. She understood. Sandra smiled gently. "You asked me what God means to me, Lily," she said softly. "He is my reason to keep going." The room fell silent. But it wasn't the silence of uncertainty. It was the silence of a truth settling in. And now, everyone had only one question left in their minds. What happens next? Sandra paused at the podium. The silence in the room deepened. People were waiting for her to speak, but she wanted this moment to last a little longer. Some words shouldn't be spoken until they find their full meaning. Finally, she took a deep breath. "I've asked myself this question for years, Lily," she said. "If God is with us, why are some things so hard? Why do we sometimes feel alone?" Lily didn't blink. She sat there, still clutching the Bible her grandmother had given her, but Sandra noticed her fingers weren't gripping it as tightly as before, because sometimes asking the question is more important than hearing the answer. "And then I realized," Sandra continued, "God never promised things would be easy. He never promised to give me all the answers right away. But every time I fell, He gave me a reason to get back up." Lily tilted her head slightly, thinking. "Sometimes that reason was a person," Sandra said. "Sometimes it was a moment, and sometimes it was just a feeling deep inside me. But whenever I was about to give up, there was always something pulling me back. And that," she said softly, "is what God is to me." Sandra paused. Her eyes met Lily's. A reason. For a moment, something shifted on Lily's face. Maybe she had just found her answer. But tonight wasn't over yet, because Sandra hadn't said the most important thing. And now, everyone in the room was waiting. Sandra stepped closer to the podium. Her voice was gentle, but it carried weight. "Lily, sometimes faith isn't about getting an answer. It's about finding a reason to keep going." The atmosphere in the room had changed. People weren't just listening anymore. They were thinking. This wasn't just a speech. It was a reckoning. Lily kept her eyes on Sandra. Her small frame carried the weight of a soul far beyond her years. "I was searching for an answer just like you," Sandra admitted. "But maybe the real question wasn't, why isn't God with me? But rather, am I truly looking for Him?" Lily tilted her head again, deep in thought. Sandra took a breath. "And that day," she continued, "for the first time I really listened. In the silence, I found something inside me. It didn't give me the answer I wanted, but it gave me the strength to stand." Sandra looked at Lily. The little girl wasn't clutching her Bible so tightly anymore. She hadn't let go. But she was no longer fighting to hold on. Sandra smiled gently. "You know, Lily," she said, "sometimes the greatest answer is simply having the strength to keep searching." And in that moment, something changed in Lily's eyes. She didn't just hear the answer, she felt it. The silence in the room had taken on a weight of its own. Everyone could feel the echo of Sandra's words within themselves. This was no longer just Lily's question. It had become the question that every person in that room had been afraid to ask themselves for years. Lily glanced at her mother. Her mother smiled at her through tear-filled eyes. She could see how deeply this moment was affecting her daughter. Sandra took a deep breath and turned back to Lily. "You know, Lily," she said softly, "faith is remembering that even in our darkest moments, we are never truly alone." Lily gently traced the edges of her Bible, as if she were trying to understand something. "Maybe we don't always see God," Sandra continued, "but He is always there. He is the very thing that lifts us up and gives us the strength to keep going." In the back of the room, someone nodded. A woman wiped away silent tears. Because these words weren't just for Lily, they meant something to everyone. Sandra smiled gently, her voice even softer now. And maybe your grandmother always knew that, Lily. Maybe that's why she left you this Bible. Because sometimes the answers aren't found in written words, but in what we feel. Lily clutched the Bible a little tighter. Her eyes shone, not with doubt, but with something new, a quiet certainty. For a moment the room stood still, but this wasn't the silence of uncertainty. It was the silence of acceptance. And then, suddenly, applause, first from a few, then from everyone. But this wasn't the kind of applause given at a performance. It was a celebration of the power of this moment. And at the center of it all was Lily. This wasn't just an answer. This was a transformation. Maybe there's a question you need to ask, too. As Sandra's words echoed through the room, have you ever stopped to think about your own answer? Faith, hope, or the meaning woven into the fabric of life? What does it mean to you? Sometimes the greatest answers aren't found in words. They are felt. If this story spoke to you, share your thoughts with us. Leave a comment about the part that resonated with you the most, and join the conversation. And for more powerful stories and inspiring moments, don't forget to subscribe, because some questions only find their meaning when they are answered together.